question. I'm looking at the participants. There's a Kristen that's a guest. Kristen Parsons. Oh, I see you right now. Can you introduce yourself? Okay. All right.
And Kim, just to let you know that the co-op directors do send this link out,
Okay.
and so we could have others who join us, and so they can speak if we need them to, but just be aware there could be others from the community that join, and that's okay.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for that. All right, it is 1 o'clock. It's 1:01, and we could get started. I want to welcome you to the DoSE Advisory Group meeting on August 19th, 2020. And we are going to first do roll call. So before we take roll, I just want to make sure that our members will keep their cameras on and make sure to unmute your mic before you speak so we can see you and hear you. And your picture will pop up on the screen when we hear you talking. So I will begin to go down my list. Wendy Congleton.
Present.
Thank you. Barry Goyle. Okay.
That's Larry Joe Bagley.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Barry's not here, correct? Okay. All right, Greta Stanfield.
Here.
And Tracy, is Tracy with us? Tracy Sharp? Nope.
Kim, this is Greta Hilton. I just got a text from Tracy saying that she was a little bit late, but she would be on momentarily.
Perfect. I'll come back to her. Larry Joe Bagley. Thought I saw you on there.
Yep.
Great. Jody Hall. Jody Hall is new to us, and she might be on a little bit later. She is representing Northern Kentucky Educational Co-op. So she should be on sooner than later. Hopefully she can join us. Mandy Bird. Okay. Troy Cobb. Troy here. Okay. And Kim Chevalier here. So we currently do not have a quorum.
So then today will be for information only purposes. We won't vote on anything. I also want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded, and so just be aware of that for your reference also.
So if Tracy pops on, if she's going to be a little bit late, can we come back and go ahead and vote on the minutes?
Sure, yep.
Okay, great. We'll do that when you see Tracy pop on. All right, so to begin, we'll skip the minutes and go back, start with our welcome. We have with us today Interim Commissioner Kevin Brown and Interim Chief Communication Officer Tony Cons-Tapman with us, and Associate Commissioner, Office of Special Education and Early Learning, Miss Greta Hilton. So I think, Mr. Brown, are you speaking first for us today?
I think so. I just want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. I know schedules are very busy right now, very hectic with getting back to school, but this is a very worthwhile advisory for us, one of the most important that we have. And I know we don't have quorum, but we obviously need and seek your counsel on these issues. I have to jump off at 1:30, and also I'll be in and out of the call. We're calling school districts based on reopening decisions and having some good discussions with them. But again, I want to thank you all. Greta, I'll turn it over to you for additional remarks.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. So I really, I won't take much time. We have a packed agenda, lots of information to share, but I will reiterate everything that the Commissioner said. It is so critical for us to receive your feedback, and I will say that this is probably one of the best groups that we have as far as willingness to provide feedback. And even though sometimes it's it's difficult. I appreciate sincerely appreciate the honest feedback, even when it's hard to hear. And I know that with this group especially, it's always in a safe space. And so I really can't say thank you enough. And I also want to say that I appreciate the work that you're doing in the field, because I know the hours are long and all the decisions right now are tough, and there aren't any really great ones, but you're doing a great job, and I appreciate you taking the time to represent your region. So with that, I will stop and turn it over. I guess next is Tony to share the communications update with you guys.
And Kim, I don't know if Tony has joined us yet.
Okay.
I don't see her name over there. We might want to go to the next item on the agenda, and when Tony comes back in, we can provide that update.
Great. Okay, you guys are going to have to keep me straight with us skipping around like this today. All right, the next item on the agenda is NTI guidance. It's scheduling and support, and that is with Miss Veronica Sullivan and Amanda Waldrop.
And Tony's in the meeting now. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, you're fine. Okay, Amanda and Veronica, you're just going to put pause on, and we will go back to Miss Tony Constatman and for our communications update. Hi, Tony.
Hey, how are you? Sorry about that. I was running late on a different meeting, so I apologize. Thank you very much for inviting me to come today. I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Just give me a moment.
Thanks for being with us today, Tony. We really appreciate this. It's very informative.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share the things that we are doing here at the department to get the word out, particularly not just with the COVID pandemic, but just the different communications tools that we have. So I really appreciate this opportunity. Hold on. Of course, I'm going to have an issue trying to get my PowerPoint up. So just give me a moment. I apologize,
no
guys.
And Kim, Barry Goley is with us now too. He was running a little late. So.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. Hope you're doing okay, Barry.
Doing well, thank you.
All right, I think I've got it to load now. So now it's just a matter of getting it to share. Don't we just love virtual meetings?
I know.
Good times.
Patience.
That's what I just tell myself every time. I just wish I could hit a wand or something. Okay, I think I've got it. Let me know when it shows up, so that way I know that I'm not talking without.
We can see it, Tony.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So this is very similar to what I share. So every week, the main thing I want to let you all know is that everyone is invited. Every week we host a superintendent's webcast. And even though it's called the superintendent's webcast, it is really for anyone. It's open and it's available for everyone to listen into. It's from 2 to 4 p.m. every Tuesday, 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every Tuesday. We always follow a very similar format. If there's any guidance documents that are released from the Department of Education, those are released typically on Mondays, and we always discuss those. We go over the guidance documents on Tuesdays during the webcast, and then we always have Dr. Connie White and people from the Department for Public Health. So like this week, we actually had Dr. Stack joined us to talk about some of the reporting mechanisms for COVID and things like that. But we always have representatives from the Department for Public Health with us as well, so that they're able to answer questions from the superintendents that they have in regards to reopening schools or questions about the COVID pandemic. So you are more than welcome. The community is welcome to listen in to those webcasts at any time. And you can always find that link by going to the KDE website and tuning in. So this is the update that I shared with the superintendents yesterday. And I just thought it would be good to kind of just give you some ideas, or to kind of give you a heads up on some of the things that we're working on here. Okay, if I could just advance my slides now. Okay, there we go. So last week, Thursday, we hosted a town hall with the local school board members, and that was from 5:30 to 7:30. And the purpose of that was to go over the recommendations from Governor Andy Beshear that last week to delay the in-person classes until the September or the 28th of September. And we really wanted to take that opportunity to also review the major elements of the flagship Healthy at School document that was developed by not just us at the Department of Education, but the Kentucky Department for Public Health. In addition to the other major KDE guidance documents that we have put out since mid-May, and I'll get to that in just a second. We were also participated during that town hall with the Q&A with local school board members, and I can share this PowerPoint with the committee, or with this group if you would like. I can send that on with you all if you find it helpful, because all of these things are linked. So just let me know if you'd like me to do that. We are
That'd
also
be helpful, Tony. This is Joe. You can just send it to me, and then I will load it into their Google Drive location.
Perfect. So my division and the Department of Education is also helping First Lady Brittany Beshear's effort with the Coverings for Kids office, or initiative, which is an effort to collect PPE, much needed PPE for our schools in the form of face masks for children and for adults. So many of our school districts have noted that they don't have enough. Obviously, they can go out and purchase these items, but we also have a number of community members that have asked, how can we help? And so this program was developed and put together by both the First Lady and Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman, both of whom are moms, and wanted to come up with an idea of how they can help connect community groups and families with ways to help their local districts. So each local district, I believe this number said 55. I think we're over 70 or 80 districts now are participating in this initiative. So each local district is kind of doing their own station. I think most of them are stationed at their central office. And so if any of you are interested in participating in this effort, you can get in touch with the First Lady's office, and there's information on how you can get involved with that as well. And this is the main, just to give you an idea of where you can find all of our information. So this right here is what our main, on the left, is what our main Department of Education main page looks like right now. Back in March or April, I think it was April, we launched this orange bar that has, it's a COVID-19 information. And for a little bit, we had just a page that just had links to everything that we did with COVID-19. And then about a month later, we decided that we needed to go ahead and redo the entire page and have different buttons and different functions so that people could find the information a lot easier. And so that is what came up with, that's what happened with this right side. So as you can see, since the beginning of the COVID pandemic here in Kentucky, and as it started to impact our students and our families and our districts, our focus has been kind of three things: educating, feeding, and supporting our students and our districts and families. And then of course, now we've added this fourth thing, which is reopening. But all of these things are different tabs. So you go on each of these tabs and they will take you to different things: teaching, learning, feeding sites, nutrition programs. It's really a wealth of information that we put into each of these kind of subgroups. And so under reopening, which is the focus right now, you can go to all of these documents, which I'll go to the next page. Since May 15th, we've put out, now we're probably at about 25 or 26 different documents for guidance. These are things, everything from, as you can see here, food service, pupil transportation, to workplace health and safety, There's things here on daily participation, NTI, compensatory education, as you can see, exceptional learners, preschool students. Any kind of guidance document that we're putting out for reopening can be found on that green tab on our homepage or on the main COVID-19 page. And everything that we continue to issue will be put out on those pages. So, and that includes the 2 documents that we released this week, which is the Welcoming Students for Orientation and Targeted Services. This is that small group that you're hearing about. This is the this is kind of what we've come up with DPH that was released this week, where you the guidelines for being able to bring small groups of students into the building prior to reopening. And so there's a lot of information in there about that. And then also how you track participation in Infinite Campus. And then the other big resource I think that we have that's really available, I think a lot of people, certainly our superintendents know about this and many district people do, is the FAQ Google Doc that we link on our COVID page as well. And it looks just like this. This is just a screenshot. And we have put in, we actually have some staff members that this is part of their job duty, is every time that we have a town hall or a webcast, we take the questions and we put them through and then we get answers. So even if during a webcast we have a question that we don't have an answer to or we don't get to, we have staff that are assigned to find the answers and we put them into this FAQ document. I believe, now this says August 13th. I think we're close to 1,000 questions that have been answered in here. And I believe that we are now, and this is, we go through and take, untimely ones out. So there's questions that were since March about, what do we do about graduations and things like that. So those have been taken out. These are current, questions about, anything ranging from, how do we do NTI? How do we do this? What should we do about anything? And you can search this document by using your find tool and, search by word. So it's another good resource to have. If you have a question about a particular topic, I pretty much can guarantee you there's something in it, something in this document related to that. And then the last thing I do is I just remind everybody to really watch the governor's press conference because, right now COVID is really, really hot in Kentucky, and it is impacting decisions on schools and how we're able to reopen. And so things are changing every day, that even with the change of, even with the best plans that we had and our schools have had, you just don't know what this disease is going to do. And so we just have to, stay up to date with what the pandemic and what the disease is doing, particularly with our young children and our young people, since those are the ones that we will be coming into contact with, and just kind of stay tuned with all of that information. And the one last thing I wanted to bring up is just to reassure everyone that regardless of, when our schools reopen and, if it's September 28th or if it's before September 28th, the Kentucky Department of Education is here for our schools and our districts and our people, who work for the schools and districts, regardless of when they open, because that's what we do at the Department of Education. We are here to provide the support. Certainly, you all know that. Greta's office is here for people every single day. And that's the message that we really hope that the community and our school districts can see. We've been in touch with all of our school districts since the beginning of the pandemic. Every day, we're here 24/7, and that continues regardless of what what day they open or what schedule they're on or whatnot. And so I just want you all to know that. If you have any questions for me, I'm glad to take them.
Is there any questions for Tony? It's great information, Tony, for sure.
Thank you. Kim, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in a while.
We miss you a lot. You and Kevin, I don't know. We're struggling a little bit.
I'm sure y'all are doing just fine.
You get me back midnight on September 14th.
I'm not sure when you get me back. So
He seemed a little over eager. I don't know.
I don't know why, Greta. I mean,
I don't know. We're just, hanging out.
You have been absolutely phenomenal through this whole thing. I mean, I know you don't hear that often enough, but we couldn't have asked for a better person to walk through this with us. So just so you know that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's due to the team and folks out in the district doing what you all do. That's the difference.
Well, thank you very much. I know, Greta, you had a couple people you wanted to introduce.
Yes, I apologize. I failed to do this initially. I want to introduce you to Dr. Thomas Williams. Dr. Williams is our brand new policy advisor in the Office of Special Education and Early Learning, who just came to the department. I guess today is day 3. So when I say brand new, I mean brand new. But he's already gotten his feel of the work. I think by the 3rd day, he's kind of already been baptized by fire. So we're happy to have him, and I just wanted to give him a minute to introduce himself and get to know you guys.
Thank you, Greta, and good afternoon to everyone. So again, my name is Thomas Williams, and I recently relocated here from California, from San Francisco. And so I'm very happy to be a part of Kentucky Department of Education, and I'm very excited about the work and working with each and every one of you. So again, thank you, Greta, for the introduction, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. And then we also have Jane Painter. I don't know if Jane has been able to join us yet. Most of you will know Jane. She's a seasoned director of special education from Boyle County. And we have recently hired her to be the director of special education for KSB and KSD. So we're excited to have Jane on board. And she too has been here all of 3 days. And I think she said, when she actually opened her inbox, when she got access, she already had 70 emails waiting on her. So apparently everybody got her address before she even got access. So if Jane is on, I'll give her a chance to speak, but I don't know yet. I think she was working on getting some ARC scheduled. I don't think she's on yet. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you, Kim.
Yeah, it seems like ARCs always take priority, right? Over everything we do in life.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have a little bit of business to take care of, so we're going to back up a little bit. We do have a quorum, but I'm going to call those few of you to make sure that you're here. Just go ahead and unmic yourself if you're on mute, and let me know that you're here. I think I saw you pop in. Tracy Sharp.
Here.
Great. Thank you. And Mandy Bird.
Here.
Thank you. Troy Cobb.
Yes, I'm here.
And then we saw Barry earlier. Great. Thank you. So we do have a quorum now. So we're going to go back and approve the minutes. So the minutes they were loaded in the DoSE Advisory Group Google folder. If you haven't had a chance to look over them, let's do a first and a second, and then we'll give you a few minutes if you want to go back. Who would like to give a first, please?
Larry Begley, I'll give a first.
Okay, thank you. Second, please.
This is
Greta
Eric Kelly,
Stanfield.
I'll second.
Greta. All right, I'll give you a minute if you want to look through the minutes. And I apologize, that was the May 27 minutes. I didn't give you a date. Okay, for all in favor, I will call each of you one at a time and just let me know, yay or nay. Wendy Congleton.
Yay.
Barry Goyle.
Barry Goley, That,
Oh,
Yay.
okay. I think I heard you. Greta Stanfield,
Yay.
Tracy Sharp,
Yay.
Larry Bigley,
Yay.
Mandy Bird,
Yay.
Troy Cobb,
Yay.
and Kim Chevalier. Yay. Great. Motion passes 8-0, and the minutes have been approved for the May 27th DoSE advisory meeting. Next, we need to nominate a secretary. We do not have a secretary, and we just had random people taking notes the last couple times. So if any of you would like to nominate or volunteer yourself, I would greatly appreciate it. Do I hear any nominations? Yes. Liz.
While it is the position on the board that I suck at the most, because it is so detail oriented and I do not take good notes, I'm just giving you all the disclaimers up front as the leader of this pack. However, I don't mind to be of help and do my part to help the board, help the group. Does that make sense? So, but I just wanted to be very honest and forthcoming about my skill set in that regard. But I will do my best if that's a need.
That Tracy?
Yes.
I know
Yes.
that Tracy, Larry Begley.
Larry, you're too kind, honey. You're too kind.
thanks so much, Tracy.
Larry, thank you for nominating Tracy Sharp to be the secretary. Can I have a first, please?
This is Barry. I give it first.
Okay, a second.
This is Wendy. I'll give a second. And Tracy, if you need help, I'll be right there.
Yeah, good.
Thank you. She could be co-secretary. I feel certain I could nominate Wendy Congleton for co-secretary.
And
Well,
that would be fine.
The one good thing is these meetings are taped, so that is good. Okay, all in favor? I'll call each of you again. Wendy Congleton.
Yay.
Yay. Barry.
Yay.
Greta Stanfield.
Yippee.
Tracy.
I mean, yes, thanks.
Larry.
Yay.
Mandy.
Yay.
Troy.
Yay.
And Kim. Thank you very, very much, Tracy. Greatly, greatly appreciate that. So we are good. Congratulations, Tracy, on being the secretary. We'll help you through it, we promise. Okay?
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
All right, next on the agenda, we are on for now NTI guidance by Veronica Sullivan and Amanda Waldrop. And I think Amanda, were you going to go first?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I wanted to give you a quick update on the progress that's been made as a result of the focus group that we had a couple weeks ago. And I do want to say that we truly appreciate you taking the time to participate in the focus group and sharing what support schools and districts need around special education at this time. So just to kind of give you a background of what's happened since then, since the focus group, we compiled your feedback and we broke it down into themes. We then shared this information with the special education regional cooperatives, and we received their input on the same questions that you were asked. From there, we reviewed the topics covered in the spring webcast series, the reopening guidance that's been released, and upcoming guidance that we know that is kind of in the works, to see which topics had not yet been covered through those materials. And so as a result, the topics that I'm about to share with you here in just a moment were the topics remaining as potential web series items. And I wanted to share those with you today just to see if there's any other feedback that you have before we move forward with those. And we plan to start these the web series in September is where we're at right now. And we're still trying to get the dates situated with that, but we'll let you know that as soon as possible once we get that together. And then I did want to tell you as well, when I pull up the list, you'll notice that related services is not specifically identified on there. So I'm going to turn it over to Sylvia for just a moment just to talk a little bit about the teletherapy piece so that we can, and while she's talking about that, I'm going to pull up the list so you all can see the list here in just a second. So Sylvia, I'll turn it over to you for just a moment.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see you this afternoon. I'm so happy that you're here today. One of the things that came up last week was on the DoSE advisory, the DoSE listserv, we actually noticed that districts are really starting to struggle with telehealth concerns, particularly as it relates to small group instruction and whether or not that is allowable. And so I actually was able to get in contact with ASHA, the American Speech Language Hearing Association, to help inform and update. I anticipate that will go out soon. It's in kind of its final stages for us to look at it. But I think the key things for us to understand when we're moving forward, and that you'll see when you come out of this guidance is just, we'll call them, you'll see us call them telehealth consultations. That's because that's how they're defined in regulation. You'll also you'll hear things about how, districts remain responsible for providing FAPE to students with disabilities. I think that's not a surprise. That's in kind of every single document that we've given so far. And how, the provision of those services via telehealth is not only allowable, but it's also encouraged by both OCL and ASHA. I think what we're hearing is a lot of conversation about teachers who are very concerned with their certifications from ASHA. And there is an ethical requirement that discusses telepractice. And so when I discussed that with Kentucky's compliance officer, his name is Tim Boyd. If you have any teachers who are really concerned, he would suggest that they call him and kind of talk it through, but that guidance was written prior to COVID-19, that they couldn't have anticipated that these types of things on, and overwhelmingly, we're just very happy to hear that Kentucky was actually concerned with ethics in the first place. So they were very happy, but they are allowable. They're encouraged because they allow the related services to continue even when districts have to close for public health concerns. There's a lot of questions about whether or not you can bill to Medicaid, and the answer to that question, is yes. And that you'll see that the guidance will give you some regulations that'll help you know what's allowable in the telehealth coverage and reimbursement requirements for Medicaid. We're not experts in that, so we'll provide you with the regulations that you can reference, and you would have to continue to call them. It is okay to do group telehealth consultations, and that will be part of those as well, but there are some FERPA considerations that come into play with that. FERPA applies because of the educational records. It doesn't necessarily automatically amount to a FERPA violation as long as the provider doesn't disclose student educational records or information that's contained therein. That's tricky, right? So when we think about how do we do that, if there's a list of participants on the screen that the teacher is sharing, it could be problematic. If the teacher says, hey, Johnny, in your IEP, it states X. So teachers will have to be kind of cognizant of the things that they're saying, cognizant of things like recording sessions and how they go about doing those things in order to maintain FERPA compliance. And there's some guidance that you'll see in that that will link to, we link in the thing to, there's a document called Student Privacy in Special Education, an Educator's Guide during and after COVID-19. That's actually set up by the National Center for Learning Disabilities and another group that is, and I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but it's a Future of Privacy organization that put together a really great brief. It's the first link. I would totally suggest that you read it when you get this email. We're going to put it out on the DoSE listserv to answer some of those questions. But it will help to it goes through things like recording sessions and how to do that and the things to think about. ASHA has a telepractice checklist for school-based practitioners and professionals. That will be linked as well. And then there's also a link to ASHA's general telepractice resource. The question I just have for you guys is there anything, there's also, Ash's phone number and Tim Boyd's name so that practitioners can call him should they have additional questions about their certifications. His big takeaway was kind of like, there is no ASHA police. We're not going out and looking for people that are doing this. We actually really encourage this type of situation because we know that it will help benefit students with disabilities to to be able to receive instruction, but that there could be times when telepractice would not be appropriate based on the needs of the student or the type of activities that were happening. So all of that will happen. But the question I have for you all is just really, is there anything else in terms of telehealth consultations that you feel like needs to be addressed before we release this that we have not addressed so far?
Sylvia, I think I was the one that started the listserv question.
That's okay. It was good. It got everybody. I think it's good to get it all kind of out there and that everybody, it really kind of, I thought it was informative for us to make sure, okay, we really do need to address this and we need to address it quickly for districts. So I appreciate it.
I thank you so much for doing the research and for the guidance that you all are going to put out, because I know my therapist is as well. I mean, they're very concerned about their licensure, of course, but then I think it goes to a new level of even the teachers have some concern of the groups. So I think this will just help ease a lot of anxieties. And, they did ask me, and some of the guidance I've read said a written consent's not required. So I think maybe that's a discussion.
Okay.
I've worked a little bit on one that one of my colleagues in Illinois had their school attorney write, and it more or less just talks about group instruction and related service therapy, and sort of it's more, these are the expectations of the parents. Don't record, don't take screenshots. It's probably not worth the paper it's written on, but it may make somebody think a little bit before they do. So
sure. No, that's good to know. I can look into that and ask the questions and make sure we get that addressed. Thank you for the feedback.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Nope. Okay, man, I'm gonna throw it back to you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Sylvia. All right, so this here is, and it may take just a second to load. I don't know if you all can see it yet. So these are the proposed web series topics that we're going to move forward with in September, obviously depending on what your all's thoughts are on today, but this is kind of what we're proposing based on your all's input. So what we've got here is the first item is addressing the IDEA during COVID-19. So a lot of that would be based on just compliance questions that you all had and things that we've been getting at the agency. So that's where we would take an opportunity to address some of those items. So that would be one webcast topic that we're proposing. And then from there, you all had mentioned co-teaching. And so that's another webcast that we would like to do as well, based on your all's input as far as co-teaching in the virtual and in-person setting. And then instructional strategies for students with disabilities, academic and behavior, and what that looks like in virtual and in person. And specifically, we want to make sure that we address the engagement strategies because we've been hearing a lot of feedback on that that's an area of support that's needed. So those are our initial ones that we have proposed based on the input that you all provided, as well as the input that we received from the special education regional cooperatives, and looking at all of the guidance that's been released so far. These were kind of the items that were remaining. And then there's one more down here that I kind of have separated from the rest because I wanted to get your all's input a little bit more on this particular one. This was in the feedback that we had received from you all regarding the implementing and managing IEP during virtual instruction. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper with this one because this is a pretty large topic. So I wasn't sure if there's a specific area that would be best to address, like as far as a priority or a need in this area. So I wanted to open it up to the group for just a moment to see, help us with this one a little bit more, just so we can make sure that we're meeting your needs.
Well, you know me, I always have something to say, so I can start.
Hey, I appreciate that. It's okay.
Just as far as implementing and managing, I think teachers get really concerned that they're not able to fully implement the IEP exactly how they were doing it before.
Gotcha.
So just giving them a little bit of relief on, you know, nobody is getting everything they had before, even regular ed kids at this current time. So what does that look like, and how do they back that down to make sure that they're getting enough? And progress monitoring. Those were the two big ones.
And I agree with Kim. This is Wendy from Gary. Progress monitoring is another big one. Although I keep quoting some of the stuff Greta has said in the past, it may look different, but something is better than nothing, I believe is what Greta used to say. We still have a hard time with that as well. Progress monitoring is a big one. And just being able to retrieve baseline now too, once they're back in school.
Okay. Baseline. Gotcha. Okay. Any other thoughts on that as far as priority areas?
So can we do one? And I think there was one, but just to kind of follow up on the specifics with the therapy during, you know, the telehealth therapy during this time, because we're even going to have kids who aren't going to come back to school. And I know it's being addressed in the guidance documents, et cetera, but could there be an opportunity to have that real live conversation in a way that they can watch and get that feedback?
Okay, so maybe a specific webinar or webcast that kind of goes through the guidance.
So that they, yes, just as a reassurance to them, because just like, you know, she was speaking earlier, they worry.
Gotcha. Okay. Paired with teletherapy guidance, so something where we just kind of talk through it. Okay.
Yes, for them to be able to hear that out loud as well.
Gotcha.
Amanda, do you mind if I ask a follow-up question on that one?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things that ASHA offered us when we were talking through them was to participate with us on a webinar. Do you feel like that would be beneficial?
I definitely think so.
Yes.
Okay, because one of my thoughts was, quite frankly, that they don't really, it doesn't really matter what I have to say about their ASHA certifications. It's like, you can say it all day long, but until ASHA says it out loud, then I'm not going to believe you. And so maybe that is something we could look into.
Okay. So I have that here on the notes, maybe having ASHA participate.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's their primary concern is what's ASHA thinking? What are they going to do, et cetera.
Gotcha. Okay. Wonderful. Any other thoughts? We can also, I can pull these back up to these topics if there's other input that you all have on these, because then today's really to be used as kind of like a fine tuning. Let's adjust anything that we need, and I appreciate your all's input. This is extremely helpful. And then from here, we'll start to get everything laid out and get everything scheduled and get the recordings and get those sent out to everybody. So we really do appreciate your input. So if there's any other adjustments that we need to make to this list, we'll be happy to look into that. Any other thoughts on topics, or, and I'll try to move this up a little bit so you all can see that better. So it's all together. Right. And if you all have other ideas or if something comes up, so I'll send these to Joe so he can post them. I believe in the Google Drive. Joe, is that correct? There's a Google Drive for the group. Okay.
Yes.
So I'll send these to Joe to post in there. And so if there's other things that come to mind or any other feedback that you have for the webcast series, we really would appreciate it. And we really do thank you all so much for your time. Your feedback was incredibly helpful to help us really think through, what supports are needed for schools and districts during this time. So again, if there's other items that come to mind, or if there's things that you really need support on throughout the process, just let us know, and we'll be happy to do what we can to support you.
All right, thanks. Amanda, I have one quick question. The co-teaching, it just came to my mind. We actually talked about this in cabinet. We read an article about co-teaching during virtual, and our research group is doing a deep dive into that to get some research. So if you remind me, I'll share that with you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that would be
I
great.
haven't thought yet, but I'll share it with you. They're looking at, you know, there wasn't some great things about it, so they're going to do a deep dive into it across the country to see what that looks like.
Wow.
So
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next on the agenda is considerations for reopening schools and contingency planning. Miss Sylvia Starkey.
Hello. It's good to talk to you all again. Okay, so the other thing that we really wanted to just kind of talk through with you was the guidance that came out around contingency planning and just anything that we can do to support you. I know that Greta was able to send an email that kind of addressed contingency planning and some hot topics, but the question I really have for you is what challenges have school districts experienced with contingency planning, and what additional guidance is needed to assist school districts with contingency planning?
All right, team, this is a hot topic.
I know.
I know in my district that specifically we have kind of decided to go with like the less is more way. We are and we talked about this last night. Other people have suggested some, you know, the things to talk about and discuss in the meeting to make the plan, and then document that in the ARC. And you know, I really latched on to calling it the just in case plan, or somebody had mentioned that way, you know, that this is what happens just in case school is closed. And I think that has helped a little bit. But I know that my district and then in the region, there's a lot of people that are just afraid they're going to put too much in that statement and don't want to you know, do they need to be specific as far as like, well, we're going to do this on a Tuesday or whatever. And my guidance has been to be as vague as you can be with giving specifics, which sounds crazy, but you know, to really acknowledge and state how the accommodations are going to be given, or you know, make sure they get those, and then you know, that they will be contacted at these range of times, you know, a time of range.
Are you having challenges getting people to understand that it doesn't change the provision of FAPE, that like they're still required for the full FAPE, that it doesn't just replace the IEP?
I think that's a great question, because it almost sounds like we're relieving them, and I have pushed and pushed and pushed. I'll be honest, I haven't pushed for contingency plans because we're back where we started when we left until something else changes. But I definitely could see how that could come across, because my push has been, you do everything you possibly can do to meet every aspect of that IEP every day. The only thing that may look different is the amount of time. But other than that, I mean, we found a way for almost all types of implementation. So I'm worried about limiting.
Following the email, what were the biggest concerns that came up among your districts, in your district?
This is Larry Bailey. Is it okay if I speak?
Sure. Absolutely.
I don't know about, I'm not going to speak for any other district. I don't necessarily want anybody putting words in my mouth either. It might get misspoken that way. But as far as me personally, my concern as I'm passing this on is trying to convince somebody that if we have a contingency plan and say they only need 30 minutes during a pandemic, did they really ever need 60 minutes to begin with? And so
Sure.
I really have a concern about saying that for a 6-month period, they don't need it, but they did need it prior to this. So if anybody wants to coach me on how to decide the need is different just because of the situation that we're in, I'm all ears. Now that's my biggest concern is if I start limiting it now, saying that I can't provide it, then that doesn't sound like a good idea either.
Sure. No, that's good feedback to address.
More of our conversation, this is Tracy, if I could just, because I've seen 2 and 3 page contingency plans that, in some areas that I've asked for feedback from individuals who've worked on them. And that's great if everything else is in compliance. And I don't mean that disrespectful, but I know we can't pull that off right now. But our biggest focus is not in our conversations. We've just really been focusing on how we're going to make it happen. And the what, but not as much about the time. And I realize, I guess probably we should consider that more. And Greta's raised her hand. That's appropriate protocol. She's for us, so that's great. But just sharing that, like, more of our conversations have been around the how, the what and the how. I guess we should be talking about more the amount, but honestly, I've expected mine to maintain the same amount of service. Maybe that's not feasible, but that's been the expectation.
I just want to take just a minute and dive a little deeper because I think this is fantastic feedback. So let me back all the way up if I can, because some of this, obviously, I didn't push it all out in that email. But the idea behind the contingency planning came about really from OSEP because some states that have gone through crises have used this concept, right? Like I think it was born out of the Katrina days, but we have not as a nation. And so when the pandemic hit, OSEP really pushed on states to talk about your contingency planning. But the idea behind that was to get districts from March to May or June, whichever, and provide that good faith effort, ensure that everyone knew what services were being delivered, how services were being delivered, and parents understood what the expectations were. So in thinking about that time frame, the other thing that we also have to think about as a state is, yes, while that was very important, and OSEP was making some broad sweeping, quick decisions, just like states were and just like districts were, there were some very unique situations occurring around the nation. We had states that went into full school closures. Like shut the doors virtually and physically because governors said, pause in-person instruction. I almost said destruction. Pause in-person instruction. And so then we had some states that interpreted that to mean if we can't have face-to-face services, we won't have any services, and they didn't know how to do virtual, and it was too hard. And you've read all the articles, you've seen all this information. And then we had another group of states who did the virtual instruction, and then we had some states who just pressed pause for 2 to 4 weeks to get things together, and then moved into virtual instruction. So in March, we had folks all over the place. And I think it would have been impossible at the federal level to have said states do X because Y is coming, right? We didn't know these things at the time. So they said contingency plans is really the answer, which I think is a great idea. Now, fast forward to where we are now, and I recently had a meeting with Laurie Vanderploeg, through my work with NASD, and the information that she shared with us is basically the same information I shared with you on that email, that schools and districts cannot start on a contingency plan. The IEP is in play. And the thing that she said during that meeting that I found to be so, I don't know if it was enlightening or if it sparked fear, but the thing that she said to us was, no district should have the same IEP in August for a student that it had in March, prior to March 13th. And my concern about that is that I think, if you say that out loud, right, and you hear yourself say that, you're like, well, yeah, that's true because we've changed. But what I don't want to say is out loud that all IEPs need to change to accommodate the setting in which you can deliver instruction, because that's not how we write IEPs. We write IEPs based on the needs of the kid. And I think the feedback that you're providing is spot on, that, yeah, there may be kids who, for example, receive co-teaching 3 times a week, but because of the pandemic and the setting that they're in, they now get one-to-one virtual instruction less frequently, but more intensely, so that they move forward. And I think you capture those things in the conference summary, and you can talk about that, but that's not a broad sweeping change of IEPs, right? It's just, this is how we can do it to deliver the same type of instruction based on the same needs the kid had in March. Because if anything, the kids are going to have more needs coming out of this than they did going in, right? There's going to be very few kids who come out of this and go, okay, yeah, it's all good now. I'm not behind at all, right? Because the whole nation's going to be behind. And so I think, as we think about that, that's why I'm really hesitant to say, don't change your IEPs, or I'm hesitant to say, change your IEPs to meet this moment, because that's not what we're meeting. We're meeting the needs of the kids. So I just want to throw that out there and make sure, one, that what I'm saying in these emails are clear, and get your feedback on how we can articulate this along with everything else that Sylvia is saying, because it is such it's a complex situation, and it is about making a good faith effort. Although I will tell you that, OSEP is not saying make the good faith effort now. They're saying get those IEPs written, ensure everybody's delivering instruction. This is the environment we're living in. And while that this is true, but that's why I stress that we have to communicate, because there are certain things right now that are virtually impossible to deliver because of the threat to public safety. And it's not worth anyone's life, right? If we have medically fragile people involved, it's not worth that. So I'll stop there and just let Sylvia continue with her conversation. I apologize.
That's okay. I think the question we were wondering from you all is, what guidance is still needed, and what do you think is the best method of delivery for that guidance? So is there further written guidance after that email, or do you feel like that covered things for you and your districts? Is there more that we need to talk about? And if so, what's the preferred method of delivery for that for you?
This is Barry Goley. And so a lot of the districts around me have already developed or pushed out contingency plans, even after the email came out. And I've kind of talked with my staff. And so I agree exactly with what Greta said, that we need to really, to the greatest extent possible, implement these IEPs the best that we can. To me, developing a contingency plan on the front end is almost like communicating to the parent, we're going to fail your child this year. We're going to fail meeting their needs, so we're letting you know that up front. And so I don't like doing the contingency plans at the very beginning until we see where gaps do lie in delivery of services. I don't know if that makes sense, but some of the contingency plans that I've seen from neighboring districts is almost saying to the parent, we're not going to be able to implement this IEP to the extent that it's written, so just be prepared. And so I just don't like putting that message out there. So I've been telling the staff here that to the greatest extent that we possibly can, we need to implement the IEP as written. Then we can come back at a later day to meet and discuss with the parent. We've seen some challenges, we've seen some concerns in trying to implement, so now we need to kind of develop a plan to address wherever those gaps lie. Now, if that's not correct, please let me know.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. Greta, you were saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, he just said it better than I did. Yeah.
I mean, I also think focusing on compensatory ed is going to benefit the students way more than a contingency plan will ever do for them.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. And we do, this is Wendy from Garrett, because I was talking to a few districts yesterday and a few directors in the Southeast South Central Co-op. What we simply did, there's no extra forms, and kind of like what Kim said last time, no more check boxes to check. It's simply some guiding questions that we came up with to help us put a little bit of a blurb and discussion in that conference summary template. And then we'll come back to it later, what Barry's saying, and talk about compensatory services. So I agree.
I agree with that too, but my problem is, like, I know for my district specifically, and conversations I've had within the region, the contingency plan is, you know, I want to have it just like I said in the discussion in the conference summary, not specific, you know, very specific, but my school has adopted a school-wide platform to use, which is virtual, and they want all the kids on the same platform. And we are starting school NTI. And so we have our NTI learners, and then we have our virtual learners who have signed up for virtual instruction, you know, indefinitely, or that's their chosen for this school year. We anticipate a lot of those kids are going to come back in January, because our overall statement is that they have to stay on it until Christmas. But of course, I've already discussed if they have an IEP, that's an ARC, you know, we can come and talk about that separately. But so that's kind of the way that it is set up. It's not very conducive to special ed, and we're working with that. Like we're working on how we set that up. So the contingency plan, though, is what's going to happen when they're not in school for NTI. But when they are not going to be in school and they have chosen that as their instruction for the year, well, then everything, I mean, your IEP can't stay the same, if I understand this correctly, because they're not going to be in a school setting. They're going to be virtual all year. And so as for our contingency plans, I've just said, you know, wait till their annual review comes up and have that discussion in the ARC, but you know, contact all your families to talk about schedules and things before that. But if they're going virtual full time, I'm assuming we have to address that a little differently than just a contingency. Or am I wrong about that?
So I think, Greta, you have your hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
No, I don't want to get in front of you if you have thoughts.
No, you're fine.
So this is where it gets really super complicated, right? Like if we as a state or you know, we as a district say we're doing NTI for the first 6 weeks, right? That's what our district's doing. And that's the only option available to you. Then the offer of faith that the ARC makes is based on that setting. That doesn't mean you go in and do blanket IEP changes. It just means that you change your delivery, your instructional delivery model. And if there are services, and I use orientation and mobility all the time, and I don't mean to say that there are certain O&M services that there are certain O&M services that can be delivered virtually, but the majority can't, right? So that's just what I lean on. So if there are O&M services that can't be, then as an ARC, you just discuss that. I mean, because it is what it is, right?
Right.
And the remedy for a denial of faith is compensatory education, period. So if a district goes ahead and says, look, you know, this is where we are because of the threat to public health, and we're going to offer you compensatory education to make it up on the other side of this, whatever that looks like, then that really takes out the litigious relationship, because one, I think it's calming to parents to know that, you know, we all know that my kid's not getting all the services that he or she should, but we're protecting his or her health as well as the health of adults at school and adults in the home. And we have a plan to remedy that when we come back to face-to-face instruction. And should this become a litigious relationship, then you're going to save a lot of money on attorney fees, because you've already said, look, we did it, we own it, we're going to do it. And there's not much else that can happen. But then the part where it gets really confusing is just what I think it was Mandy said. It's when we start to have these situations where districts may be open face-to-face, but there's some choice put into play here. Like, okay, you families get to make the choice if you want face-to-face or if you want in person or a hybrid model. And as we move forward, we probably will see more and more of that as we, as the numbers go down in the virus, we begin to see the effects of, some mitigating measures, which is a good thing. And in conversations with OSEP, they have shared with us that they encourage the idea of choice, and they want districts and states to offer that to parents. And it's a super hard decision to make out there. But we all have our own health concerns that we need to be in tune to first. And following up on that, the thing that OSEP has said is that, all right, so like if you have a kid who needs that in-person service and you've got O&M providers in person at the building saying, this is what your student needs, then, they have advised us, don't shy away from that. In those IEP team meetings, go ahead and say, this is the offer of FAPE that we're making available to you. We are saying to you, our buildings are open, our providers are here, we believe this is what your child needs, and that offer of FAPE is available. If parents say that, but that's not what we can accept based on the needs of our family, then document that and then move to the second offer of FAPE. Just say, you may not be able to accept this offer of FAPE, so the offer of FAPE that's now on the table is through this virtual model, and these are the things we're not going to be able to provide. The thing that concerns me the most, because I think that's very doable. I think having those conversations is very doable. I think where we're going to run into some concerns is I think we're going to have some really tough conversations with ARC chairs, because I don't know that they're going to feel really comfortable making some of those tough decisions. And I don't know, again, I'm going to be very bold here and say that I don't know if all directors of special education are going to feel really comfortable giving that level of authority to ARC chairs, right? And so I think that's because we've not had ARC chair training like this ever before, right? I mean, we just haven't. And so you don't have experienced people doing, people who are experienced in this, doing this. But the piece that becomes really problematic is the self-paced learning model or self-instruction model. And some districts are doing this. That's why I really wanted, we sought your help in trying to find out if this was a widespread practice or if it was just going to be a few districts. But if districts are saying that you get an option of having a self-paced model with no direct instruction period, that, here's your curriculum, student, you take it home and work with your parents to provide that, that's still not private school. That's still remote learning. But the problem with special education students, should parents select that model, is that there isn't an offer of FAPE. Because you're not providing specially designed instruction, you're not providing related services. And that's a super tough one, because if a parent, if you have that ARC meeting and the parent declines the face-to-face model, declines the hybrid, declines the remote learning, but demands that that's the situation, then you have to start asking the question, and I'm hesitant to even say this out loud, but then the question becomes, are you accepting special education services at this point, or are you revoking consent? But I'm going to say that I'm again hesitant to say that, even though I have said it. I would never encourage that, because you've got to be super, super careful, and OSEP has warned states about this as well, in not putting parents in a situation where they feel forced to revoke consent, right? And so that's going to be a fine line to walk should you do that. The thing that I foresee that happening, though, is that you may have folks making decisions and then special ed has to catch up to that. So I'll stop there and let Kim speak.
My only question that popped up I haven't thought before is when you were talking about, which some districts do, they will allow in-person, full virtual, and then they let them go virtual until December and get to make another choice after December, or hybrid or self-paced. So those are kind of the four, right, that you talked about. However, if a district offers either virtual or in person, the ARC believes it's in person. What my fear is I don't want to get into, I'm allowing students to choose a hybrid because my district isn't allowing a hybrid. which that's going to come up, I think, because we're like, well, if we can do this here and this at home, you know, I think we need to let them know it needs to go with whatever the district decision is, and then we make decisions based on that, because it's going to confuse, I think it's going to really muddy up the waters if we, I don't know, if we say, well, because my kid is with special needs, the ARC can say it's going to go hybrid.
And I think that's a valid point. My understanding is that a lot of districts are doing that, like their boards are approving certain plans, and then those are the areas in which special education staff are having to work within to provide an offer of FAPE. Because the reality is the responsibility of the IP team of the ARC in Kentucky is to provide the offer of FAPE. It's regardless of that instructional delivery model, and FAPE can be provided in a remote setting. And I think that, and I said this to directors the other day in a text, and I'll say this out loud publicly, for 40 years, special education has begged to have a seat at the table. We, you know, since the passing of IDEA, special ed we have said as special education folks, if special ed were at the front of the line or at the seat at the table and all of these exceptionalities were thought about first, everything else would fall in line. And here we are, right? This is our moment to really think outside the box as special education folks. And somebody said this in a national meeting the other day, and said, think about, you know, our forefathers in the early 70s who had the idea of IDEA and had the idea of an entitlement law, right, to afford people with disabilities the right to be to have a free, appropriate public education in a least restrictive environment. And, you know, think about how that has evolved over the last 40 years. And here we are today, really resetting the stakes, I mean, so to speak. This is a brand new environment, and it's pushing us to think outside of the box. And as we think bigger and think more innovatively, and we're at the front of the conversation, and I think now is the time to really think about how do we continue with synchronous learning, which is so very important, but also how do we do asynchronous learning and still individualize things. And it's not going to be easy, but it's an opportunity.
Well, I just want to say one more thing, and then I'm going to shut up because I'm sure everybody is wanting me to shut up. But I understand, and I agree with everything you're saying. But what I'm coming from is, the choice has already been made by the school. So I'm trying to fit in what we can do within the parameters set by the school. And, when you say special ed needs a seat at the table in my district, it's me. Like, I'm the one that talks about special ed. And so there's no 2 or 3 people. And it's, so I feel like, and I'm comfortable with that. I know that's my role, but, I can't go back and change, like I didn't have input in what program we picked for our curriculum program and things like that. So that's for our online platform. So that's just my thing. Like, we're going to do online and we're going to make it work, and we're going to, offer services as best way we can and make sure, that they have what they need. And that's kind of the terminology in meetings that we're going to use, such as, we're going to provide your services in the way, and we're going to make sure we meet the needs on the IP and meet, the standards and whatever of what you need to meet your goals. But it's just difficult because when they go on the virtual, if they decide to do virtual, and for example, they are in a co-teaching classroom and they can't participate, like the teachers can't work it out. So a co-teacher and a regular teacher are in the class at the same time. I mean, there's going to be times when that co-teaching is going to have to not be co-teaching and just be one-on-one. And I mean, I would assume if that's going to be our plan for the whole year or whole semester, that would be a change in placement, because we're not putting him in a co-teaching environment. It's in a one-on-one environment. But if that's not the case and we don't need to have meetings, then I'm all like, yes, because, I want to have as few meetings as possible. But that's where I was coming from. And so, like I said, I'm going to shut up now because I know we got lots of stuff to talk about. And, you know, I'm sure, like I said, most of you are like, okay, shut up already. But that's just, you know, that's my problem. And that's for some of my friends I talk with frequently. You know, that's some of the things that we are just struggling with.
So, Media, I want to start by saying, like, we'll never tell you to shut up because that's the whole reason we brought you to the table, was to bring your perspective. So we want to hear it here. That is the whole purpose of this group, is to be able to provide that perspective to the department. So we appreciate you, and all of your feedback is valuable. So don't limit yourself. I think, you know, you guys have brought some really good points. One of the things that really struck me in this conversation, and that I think is important for us to reiterate, is there was a conversation a little bit earlier about guiding questions. And I think that's really the best way to address this, right? So, you know, there's all kinds of forms that you can find online that you can fill out for a contingency plan. But ideally, it's more of a conversation than filling out a form, right? We're not creating a new AIP. We're not talking about how all those things happen, but we're talking about what did we learn about you when we had to shift quickly to remote instruction that I didn't have to provide you before, but I may have to do now. So if I found out that in March, when we shifted quickly to online instruction, that you don't have internet access, and so you can't access instruction if we were to switch quickly like that, how can I get that to you? How can I still provide you services? And here's how we'll adjust your programming should those things happen. It's not about not providing things. It's more about how do we shift your instruction to meet the needs that you're under in this crisis, right? Do I need to provide you with a hotspot? Do I need to have a teacher load your assignments onto, you know, if I don't have that availability, or there's no, you know, if all the internet is gone, do I need to load it onto a flash drive? Do I need to make sure you have a device because you didn't even have a device to be able to do those things? Do I need to provide you with therapy equipment because all of those things are at school, but you really need to be able to access those things at home? There were some districts that were driving back and forth, like dropping off things on kids' front porches to make sure that they had the things that they need to do. And so I think, you know, I would really encourage you when you're talking about those contingency planning conversations to talk through those questions. What do we know about you now that we didn't know about you then? And your plan, right? When I'm thinking about your program, how can I implement that program if things switch quickly and swift to another model? What do I need to do differently? It's not that I'm not going to provide you services. It's just that I might have to send things home in a different format, or it might look a little bit differently, but we'll still provide you with instruction. So I really appreciate you all's really conversation today. And I think this has been a great way for us to kind of talk through. It sounds like, you know, that there's still a little bit need for a further conversation about these things, you know, statewide. Is there a preferred method of delivery for those kinds of conversations? Do you prefer like written guidance? Do people need to see it in writing? Do they like having it online?
Okay, I'm the nerd that probably has read every guidance document that KDE has put out, but I like having that in my hand so I can highlight. Then I'll pull from that important things I need to share with my staff. So I like written.
And I do have to say that superintendent webcasts have been phenomenal for superintendents, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes, having voice, phenomenal.
I think ultimately it's a variety because some really read the documents. I just share the documents with all of them, and some really read that. And then I think some to hear it as well. So I think it's really kind of a variety based on people retrieving the information based on their learning style.
Thanks, Tracy. Anybody else?
I was going to concur with Tracy as well, because I think some like to read and some don't like to read anything beyond 3 words. So yeah, just if there could be a variety that could meet all those different learning needs.
Thanks, Barry.
Even if it's like a screencast-o-matic that goes over the document with voiceover.
I'll turn it back over then. Thank you guys for the discussion on this. It's really helpful.
Thank you, Sylvia. Next on our agenda is member discussion and Q&A.
Actually, Kim, we have participation tracking in Infinite Campus. Karen Davidson was going to provide some information and make sure DoSEs that you all know how that information is being tracked. So, Karen, you want to go ahead?
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen and do some slides. This is the same presentation I gave yesterday at the superintendent's webcast. So if you saw this, it'll be a little familiar, but please feel free to ask questions and I will do my best to speak specifically to how it works for you guys. Let's see. You guys see my slides now?
And one thing I talked to Karen about, of course, she is the technical side of this on how you enter the information. And so our program staff can provide some of the program specific related to special education and how that relates to how technically that works in Infinite Campus. So thanks for being with us today, Karen.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for the support. So I'm going to talk about this in a more general kind of way. And like Joe said, if you guys have really specific questions about how this relates to special ed, we'll do our best to get those questions answered. Basically, the biggest, most important thing here is that you're not required to take attendance this year. However, daily participation tracking is required. And so earlier this year, the department came out with the daily participation and non-traditional instruction document that gives some advice about or some guidelines around what counts as daily participation. And then after that came out, we started getting a lot of questions about course setup and IC, and especially as districts made decisions about how they were going to start the school year, we started getting a lot of questions about how to set that up. And of course, all of that's changed. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I have for you. The way we're thinking about it is that there's 3 types of courses. And we recommend that the majority of courses be set up with the new feature in Infinite Campus. It's called blended learning groups. It's basically a way, I think they use the word attendance just because it's Infinite Campus, but they're attendance groups. And you can have some students that are scheduled to be remote, some that are scheduled to be virtual, whether it's everyone's in the virtual group because it's remote learning, or if everyone's in the in-person group, or if you're doing an AB hybrid schedule. There's, as we know, there's so many possibilities for how school could look like, and that it's going to change perhaps quickly and perhaps often. So using the blended learning groups are really going to give schools the maximum amount of flexibility to just change up how things are looking based on, where we're at in the year and what's going on. So there's lots of support from Infinite Campus around how to set these up. It is pretty technical, but I know a lot of people have been diving in really deeply to that work and learning how to do it. And then there's also virtual courses, and we consider those to be a course where it's primarily self-paced, whether it's Edmentum, Odyssey-ware, something like this that the district has chosen. There's different ways to use that kind of online curriculum. It could be a case, I'll flip back, where the teacher is the primary instructor and they're using that curriculum, and that would be here using the blended learning groups. But if a student's really and truly primarily just working on that curriculum, and I'll be honest, I don't know how many special education students would be doing that. So hopefully you guys can get most of your students here, because in my opinion, this is the best way to try and set things up because of the amount of flexibility needed. But if students are in fully virtual courses where maybe a teacher is just checking in on them, offering mentoring or guidance, Then we put together this document that shows how to set that up in Infinite Campus to track daily participation. Basically, our recommendation is to put a placeholder course within the schedule of the student's day, and then put the actual instructional courses into the non-instructional time, so that because of the guidelines in that original document that was put out, because of the guidelines around participation, what counts as participation, you can just check in that one placeholder course code and not have to do each and every single course. It just makes things a little easier. Greta, I know when I presented this on Monday at the Superintendent's Advisory Group, you had a kind of a nuance or a finer point in regards to how that applies with special education, though, and that there are different requirements. So I'll let you say that again, either now or at the end, to make sure that that finer point is put on this for this group.
Sure. The only thing that I wanted to share when we talked about this on Monday is that while this is the expectation for all students, but for students with IEPs, the participation checks may need to be more involved because you're still having to track ongoing progress monitoring. Sorry, my dog is coughing. You have to not only make sure that students are engaged and participating, but also in order to fulfill your progress monitoring requirements, it may be to your benefit to do this more frequently. So in other words, the same thing, I guess the easiest way of saying this is let the IEP needs drive your participation.
And this guidance here is, it's really a recommendation, and we're not saying it has to be set up this way. If based on IEP student needs, you are checking in with every course that they're doing and you want to track it that way, you can absolutely set up every course during the instructional day and mark participation by course. I think that would be great data to have, but just for this year, the agency decided that just having that one, like, yes, the student participated today, that's the kind of participation tracking that we're looking for, overall and in general. But that doesn't mean that you might not want to track it a little bit more closely. Finally, the last kind of course is performance-based courses. These are usually dual credit, work study, independent study, things like that. And these can also be set up with a placeholder course. It's fairly common in years past anyhow, but this year you can also track participation on those by using the attendance box on the placeholder code. So that's the big gist of it, the big overview. This document has a lot more specific instructions on setting up performance-based and virtual courses if that's something people need. We have communicated this out to course code contacts. It went out to CASIS point of contacts. It'll go out in our school counselor newsletter, I believe, later this week. So I'm hoping that this information is getting in the hands of the people that need it. But I'm happy to take questions for you guys, or get feedback about things you're wondering about or concerns that you have in this area.
Thank you, Karen. That was great information. And I did watch it when you presented at the superintendent's webcast. That was they really were listening to that, I hope. So that was good information.
Thank you.
And Karen, if you can send me that presentation, I will put it in their Google Drive for them. Thank you.
Absolutely, I will. Thanks, Joe.
Just one quick thing that I was thinking about in some districts, that their DoSE might be very disconnected with their DPP that does attendance. My worry is when schools say they're going virtual and a student is in virtual, they'll just automatically put them in the virtual, not looking if they're special education, et cetera, because that's, a whole different department that might be doing that. So really, ensuring that that the DPPs at the DPP meeting knows, like, hey, you have to connect with your special ed director. I think that's important. And I don't know how much we cross over with DPP. So
I appreciate that. And I'll let Josh Whitlow was on earlier and he had to hop off for another meeting, but I forgot to mention they did share this with the DPPs last week, but I'm not sure if they made that specific connection that they need to be thinking about that and talking to their directors of special education as well. So I will reach out to him and make sure he understands that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you're ready for open discussion, Kim.
All right. We open discussion. That is, remember, this is a safe place. We are being recorded, but it is a safe place to discuss and you know, hopefully maybe with our peers get some answers.
So I'd like to start. This is Troy Cobb, Bullitt County. I think it's kind of ironic you say this is a safe place, but it's being recorded.
And
okay.
will be published to the KDE webpage, I have learned.
Right. So, okay. So my question is going back to our previous conversation with Sylvia and talking about contingency planning and all that. So we were talking about moving into the school year, we need to be focused on implementing the IEPs as they are written minute by minute, not focusing on creating contingency plans to assist, not even to assist, but that might limit the implementation of those IEPs. Is that correct?
So I think it's important to remember that a school year should not begin with a contingency plans. Contingency plans are for when instruction has to shift rapidly. So during this school year, last school year in March, when we shifted to online instruction, it happened like overnight, right? We didn't have any way of predicting it coming. We weren't able to prepare. Right now, we've had the whole summer to prepare and get ourselves ready. So moving into the new school year, you should be moving forward with implementing the IEP. Contingency plans are for when it shifts quickly.
Okay, that helps.
And really writing those contingency plans, I really struggle with it because depending on why we're shifting is going to change the outlook of the contingency plan. A fire versus a virus that we're dealing with is completely different, and how we provide for students may look very different. So I really struggle with contingency plans versus fully implementing the IEP to the best of our ability, giving it our best faith effort, and just leaving it at that, no matter what the situation is.
Sure. And I think it's also important to remember that there is no requirement to have a contingency plan. So there's no regulatory requirement for a contingency plan. So that would not be something we were looking for if we were to come and monitor.
I think the hang up I'm having is we write IEPs based on us living in a normal world. Kids showing up and us having school like we always do. Under our current circumstances, it just doesn't seem realistic that those IEPs that are written to be implemented in person can be implemented remotely. It just, if the IEPs should be implemented remotely, then they should be written like that. Just like we would for a kid that's going virtually, 100% virtually, then we're going to write their IEP to reflect that. If we're switching to NTI, I don't see how an IEP that was written to be implemented in person can be implemented minute by minute through NTI. Without creating some kind of a contingency plan to identify or to define what their services will look like during this shorter time period. Or that a kid, talking specifics, let's say a kid gets 40 minutes of resource time a day. 40 minutes of resource time a day through NTI may not be realistic. We may not want that kid sitting in front of a computer for, an entire 40 minutes. That may not be a realistic expectation of him. But what I'm hearing the conversation is we need to be focused on implementing those IEPs as they are written through an NTI period, even though they were written for an in-person world.
Good question.
It is a great question, and those are the same kinds of questions that we're pressing OSEP to deliver on. And tomorrow, actually, there's one of our TA centers is meeting with we have what it's called a SEAL team, but it's basically state directors of special education, and we meet as a group and talk about what's happening in other states, and which is very beneficial. And Laurie Vanderplug is going to be on the call. I can't be there because it's at the same time as SACEC, but Carolyn Morrison is going to be in the meeting, and she's going to take this question forward because I think the easiest answer to that question is yes, the IEPs can be amended based on what you can do, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with doing that, unless you get into a position where you're saying to parents, this is all we're going to offer you because we're doing NTI, and we know that your kid has super complex needs, and yes, he or she's in a resource room, for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, and needs, this related service and that related service and so forth. But we're going to offer you 2 hours a week of screen time, and that's all we can do. And so we're going to amend the IEP to say that. My caution with that is that one, you're not basing the IEP at all on a student's need if you do it that extreme. And that's why I'm really reluctant to say, yeah, you can modify those IEPs based on the setting, because I think you're right, Troy, that there are some things that just have to change. And I think in the conference summary, if it's a short amount of time, in the conference summary, you can call it a contingency plan, or you can call it a prior written notice, whatever you want to call it, because it is what it is, right? To say that we're not going to give you necessarily, or not going to be able to give you the frequency, but we're going to up the intensity. And I think that's something that would work really well for students who have less complex needs. For example, speech kids, right? Like, or DD students who may get their services in a collaborative setting. That may not happen now, but they may get more time, student to teacher, one-to-one, and thus make more progress in a virtual setting because the intensity has increased and not the frequency. But again, I think these are going to be some of these. I'll be honest, I think the reason OSEP hasn't given states the answer, and the reason that I haven't given a blanket response, is because there is no blanket answer. And that's a hard thing to say, but I really think it's just going to have to be the individualized, what is the offer of faith? And each kid's offer of faith is going to be very different. What can districts do? What can parents feel comfortable with? What's plan B should things change immediately and quickly? And it's a lot of documentation, and a best case situation. I think it's going to be a lot of minutes. a lot of meetings with a lot of minutes, and lots of communication.
Well, and in hearing you talk through that, I think we're on the same page here in the way I'm thinking. And I'm not talking about going into a period of NTI. I'm not talking about needing to amend the IEP, but rather including in the conference summary what NTI is going to look like. There are things we can't do, so this is what we can do, and then later on we'll come back and see do we need to have a compensatory discussion at that point? We weren't able to implement the IEP fully. We were able to do this. Now, what do we need to do from a comp ed standpoint?
Mm-hmm.
And we want to avoid that as much as possible. We want to implement the IEP to the greatest extent, but understanding that we may not be able to do certain things minute by minute, we can revisit that later and see what we do need to go back and make up for.
Yeah, I think we're saying the exact same thing.
Okay, all right. It makes sense.
One of my concerns, though, with doing that is, and just thinking along what I said earlier, that if we kind of go in with those discussions, it's almost setting it up to the parent that we know we're not going to be able to do this. And so I'm afraid it kind of just puts that idea in the parent's head that if I'm going in there and having discussions at the very beginning saying that I'm not going to be able to implement this to the greatest extent or fully, then it almost looks like that the district or the staff are not looking at other means of addressing that student's needs, if that makes sense. I guess I'm more cautious at avoiding kind of sticking those lines in there, and maybe because Logan County is in one of the hot spots, so we could be in school one week and out the next because our numbers are so high. And if I had to go in and have staff write IEPs every time something changed, we'd be doing this almost on a weekly basis for our kids. So,
well, and I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead.
I think if we really think about how to do this, I think for the most part, most of our kids can transition to NTI and we can deliver a FAPE and may be able to deliver the exact same amount of service minutes, and it may be full implementation. But I think because I agree with you, Barry, I certainly wouldn't want to open up the conversation with, here's what we can't provide, right? Like nobody wants to hear that right now. But I think there are going to be, some kids with, particularly those with more complex needs that we do need to be honest with ourselves about and honest with parents about what will be most difficult to provide. And then again, it goes back to that, what I said a minute ago about how do we think outside the box and ensure that we can do that. The biggest challenge, and I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, nobody loves to hear me say this, and you guys know it. The biggest challenge that we're going to have is finding the FTE available to do everything that we need to do when we have face-to-face and online and that's going to be the challenge.
Okay, good conversation, but we need to welcome Jody Hall from Northern Kentucky. Hi, Jody. Missed you. Haven't seen you in a long time.
Hi, how are you?
I went to the dark side.
So I'm just going to say, what crazy person would accept a job as a director of special ed in the midst of what we're in right now? It would be me.
It would be you. Great job. You're going to do fantastic.
I appreciate, I know I had my hand raised. Well, first of all, I appreciate being included in this because Greta, as you know, we have something scheduled for Friday, and this is actually helping answer some of the questions for the time that we have scheduled on Friday to go over because I have all kinds of them. So my question is in relationship to what we were just having a conversation around, which is when we consider resource minutes, those are written based on the time that they are out of their general education peers, out of the class of their general education peers, where when we're writing collaborative minutes, those are based on specially designed instruction time in that classroom. So for those kids who have a significant amount of resource time, and we're talking about, sometimes 3 or 4 hours in a day, it is extremely unrealistic that they're going to be online just because of their abilities to attend to that type of environment for that length of time. But we know that those minutes include all kinds of things. I mean, when I think of an MSD classroom and I think of what their day looks like, of rotations, it includes some break time, it includes teaching of self-help skills, it includes adaptive items, and we can provide activities and support around those. So I guess my question is, in essence, because of how those minutes are written and being unrealistic that they actually attend to a virtual session for those periods of time, the question I keep getting is providing resources like videos or activities, or does that count as services? to their minutes on their IEP?
Jody, this is Sylvia, and I use my favorite phrase, not so favorite phrase actually, but it depends, right? So it depends on the service that you're giving them. It depends on what's on their IEP and whether or not that helps them to access instruction. But I think, more importantly, it's important for us to think through, like, how can we provide resource instruction through both synchronous and asynchronous models, right? How do we provide special education services without forcing them in front of a camera for 4 straight hours? And so I think that's really going to be the onus on the district, is going to be to think through those things creatively and really try to figure out how you can provide them with experiences that are specially designed, that still have that specially designed instruction piece to them, but that aren't necessarily a sit and get on a camera back and forth for 4 straight hours.
So I agree. And we have super creative people coming up with lots of ways to do that, but they are paranoid about their minutes. And so when I say that, they, that's the question they're giving me. Does that count toward their minutes? Because we're saying follow their IEPs. They're wanting to follow their IEPs. They are working unbelievably hard. I will say that about, so many of them. But that's what they want me to be able to say is, yes, if it is specially designed and you have provided it and you can show that they've accessed it, that can count as services. I just don't know if that's the case. And that's kind of the question I'm asking.
Sure. And I think, it depends. I say, you're on the right track to think through that, as long as it's specially designed and it meets their needs and they're provided with these things, I think that those would tend to count. However, I can't give you a blanket, answer to say that everything would count in every situation. But I think you're thinking it through correctly, that if those things are in place, then yes, it would count. But there could be situations where those things aren't in place that would not.
And so I know you guys don't like contingency plans. I'm getting that feeling. But I am going to say this. I mean, it is whether we call it a contingency or plan or not, communicating with the parents and documenting what those services are going to look like, which in essence to me is the same thing as a contingency plan, because it's what we are going to do if this case happens, is the best case scenario, no matter what we call it, that we can be in agreement on, right? Like that's my understanding.
Yes and no, because I will tell you today, if whatever my district decides to do, if they decide to go virtual, I have no idea what is good for my kids until they're in a virtual setting for a couple weeks. And my job is to fully implement their IEP to the best of the ability, then evaluate what they can and can't do, because I can't predict how many minutes a kid could stay on a computer. There's no way. So nor do I want to. I want to be able to communicate with families, implement the plan the best possible way we can, and reevaluate as we go forward. Because the change is so drastic and so often, I think you would be killing yourself writing plans like that. I mean, I couldn't do it for 13,000 kids. So, I mean, and you guys have a lot. So like there's no, and then you're starting to confuse what the student really needs and confuse the parent. The kid should be, or the student, I shouldn't say kid, the student should be dictating the need based on data. And you have no data to write a contingency plan.
You're not using any data from the end of last year on regards to their success, because we have considered that data as part of data. Like if they did not access at all, or if.
But could they access now if they have a computer?
They had computers. So we're not in that situation. We had technology to everybody. So it was, a lack of either they were caring for other people or, it was just they did not access. So therefore we're problem solved. We're using that data to help make decisions for moving into this school year.
You could do that, I would guess. But that's a lot of if, ands, or buts on 3 months of summer, summer and
I am looking at any plan that's made as fluid, just like everything else is. But I don't know how to start up with them being remote learners from the start without doing some type of planning with parents, especially for those who get 4 and 5 hours of resource a day. We have to have a plan around that, in my opinion, because they are saying their kids cannot do that.
Mm-hmm.
Parents are communicating.
Well, I think Sylvia stated earlier, and Sylvia, you can pop back on whenever, it is up to the district to what their district needs are, correct?
In terms of contingency planning, yes. So there's no regulatory requirement that requires a contingency plan. So a district could determine what they wanted to do.
Okay. Good conversation. Right, any other topics?
Kim, one thing I'm struggling with a little bit is when we're talking about the vulnerable groups and possibly bringing them into small groups. First, I thought it was a great idea. And then the more I peel back the thought, I'm really struggling with, it's going to open a can of worms. And if I bring this group of students in, then I'm going to have a pot of parents. Why can't you bring my students in? Mom and dad can transport, but are you going to send a bus to get mine? So what's everybody's thoughts, plans regarding small groups?
That's the exact thing that was on my mind, Greta. For the
Honey, we think alike.
For the next topic. I know that's got to be plumb scary to folks. But I mean, somebody probably has something to share. I think in regards, in my mind, I've gone through all that, and then I'm like, you make decisions based on individual needs, just like, we do with the IEPs on a regular basis. But then, well, I'm interested to hear what people are going to share. We have some tough decisions to make, and people are going to want them made very, very quickly, having received that guidance yesterday.
And I will say that guidance is all over the place. I just read Florida's, I think it was Broward County's. And they're, everyone is all over the place across the nation. So
have any of you all talked about that at the local level yet to determine what you may be doing?
I think we've talked about it minimally, but I don't think there has been deep thought into different repercussions that could come from it.
Yeah. So we're going to have to be back at good faith effort with the best intent possible to take care of kids and pray that does good for kids, I guess.
And then I have, I hate to say it, but we're allowing our teachers to bring in their own children to try to help them during this time for childcare.
Yes.
So then, yeah, but we're not Jefferson County. So then, I have some therapists that are like, well, can I serve the staff kids that have IEPs? No, if we can't serve other children, no, we're not going to, I just can't make that step forward. And if I can't serve my most vulnerable kids, I'm just struggling with what to do. I want to do it, but what can of worms is it going to open?
And Sylvia or Greta, maybe you can clarify, because I know across the nation what they consider small groups is your most neediest groups, which is not subgroups. So EL, free and reduced lunch, and your special ed population, right? So those are the three that you hear about. So those are the groups that I think districts are talking about. I don't know that we need to, I think if we do that, it needs to be, if it's students with special needs, and it's all students with special needs get to come in, right? It's not a subgroup of students with special needs. I think that's where we can make that equitable. But then when we do that, I know some of the guidance from KDE was when you do that and bring them in, then that's considered more self-contained and they're not with regular ed kids. So it's a hard balance.
That's a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And that's the idea behind the small group guidance or the small groups. You know, obviously, as you saw in the governor's press release or 4 o'clock presser, you know, he opened up the door to small groups because of the needs of students. And so several staff in KDE worked closely with public health and the governor's office to get that guidance out the door. And you saw, based on that, what Kentucky's thoughts are behind small group. And then yesterday during the superintendent's webcast, I tossed out some ideas, particularly around using the LRE component. And to be completely transparent, I got that from the Special Ed Connections. There's some folks posturing out there to make sure LRE is continuing. And so, you know, when you have attorneys weighing in on things across the nation, I think it's a really good idea to share that with our locals, because we don't.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to find out about that after the fact, right?
Right.
But and then, you know, then when you also get into the whole caseload, class size, I mean, it's a never-ending paradigm. It's just a lot, and so I do think that there are 2 ways to look at this. There's the making this available for everybody, and then looking at student needs and talking through that. And you may have a speech kid who doesn't have any other needs, but really needs to be involved in that small group because they're regressing in math, and it has nothing to do with their disability. And that's not part of the offer of FAPE. That's just, look, we got some interventions we're going to bring you in for. And you may not even be talking about the identification process. We're just talking about the needs for X. And then we have students who, may be really, really having a huge divide in their learning as a result, who has, kids who have complex needs. And you may say, this is part of the offer of FAPE. We have this small group available to us. And so as part of your offer of FAPE, we're going to bring you in, should you need the service for an hour once a week. And in doing so, if that's part of your offer of FAPE, then that's a transportation issue as well, that the district would have to pick that student up and break down the transportation barrier. And it is going to be so challenging, because as you move forward with those conversations, the thing I will say here is you got to be so cautious about not violating any confidentiality when you have, the neighbor down the street, particularly in smaller districts, who say, hey, my kid comes to that, but I have to drive him or her. And you can't release information that would be part of a student's educational record. So just be cautious of that. But again, there's no easy answer here.
Makes sense.
I don't know if I'm helping or hurting. I probably just touched.
No easy answer. That's what we've come up with. That is so true. Okay, it is 2:57. We are finished at 3 o'clock. So if there's no other quick questions, then we will make a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Who is that, Tracy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. And let's do a quick roll call. Wendy. Okay. Barry.
Agree.
Greta.
Yes.
Tracy.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Larry.
Yes.
Jody.
Yes.
Mandy.
Yes.
Troy.
Yes.
And Kim. Yes. All right. All in favor? We are adjourned at 2:58 p.m. Our next
And Kim,
meeting.
I have
Yes.
one last thing before everybody takes off.
Okay.
There is an exit slip. These virtual meetings it's hard to get everything in a couple hours. And I know many of you have thoughts and ideas, and we really rely on your feedback. So we've created an exit slip for this meeting. It's just 4 quick little questions, and it allows you pretty much to provide additional concerns that you may have. I will put the link to that in the chat box, and I will also send that out in email. And so just please take some time to complete the exit slip for us so that we can get that information. So I'll post that link in here now. Thank you all.
Perfect.